It's great to be here. Yes, I'm a historian. I'm following the Nobel laureate. That's a little daunting. How many of you are history majors? Woo! Wow, I didn't think I'd get more than one. How many of you love history? Woo! Good. That's good because I'm going to be speaking about medieval history on to the present till about 10:30. So hang in there. I am a historian, and I also, as Ryan said, chair the International Affairs program. So I can join, or I can have students who join the past with the present and the future. And that's what I wanted to talk to you about. I mean, history is all around us. I mean, you know that being in San Francisco, you pass these monuments or cable cars or whatever they are. Moscone Center and even Moscone himself. I mean, that's all steeped in history. You can't avoid that. And you see movies and other things. So it's here, okay? What we try to teach students at CU is that history gives you a long perspective on the present and on the future, and in the future. We know from studying history that people wrestled with problems and challenges over the long term, not the same as today. But with that perspective, it gives you sort of a chance to stand back and say, you know, there are issues and problems today, but people dealt with them in the past too. Not always for the good, but sometimes successfully. So we're part of that sweep of history. And in international affairs, of course, which I'm going to talk about, give you some examples of this, you can talk about the present as well in foreign policy. That said, we are challenging history today. There are challenges to history that we've talked about. Let me give you some examples here. That's fine. The United Nations. If you talk about foreign policy, we've all heard this, 70 years of foreign policy has been turned on its head. Here's a picture of the United Nations. We were the leader, of course. We led the world in internationalism after World War II. Well, that seems certainly to be challenged today over the last couple of years by this administration. And that is a challenge not only to security, but to principles of free trade, of immigration, which I'll get to in a second, of open borders, of a flow of goods and services and people. That was very much the essence of American power. All right, this has been challenged, and it has not only been challenged in trade, obviously, or a trade war, well, whatever we're in now, it's hardly a war, but a trade conflict with China, and protectionism, that we really had sort of kicked that habit in the 1930s. Okay, it's back, but also it's not just this administration. Bernie Sanders has just declared as president. Right? In the last, yesterday. There's not much difference on trade between Bernie Sanders and Donald Trump. So again, from the left or the right, regardless of your ideology, that has been changed. And so if you look at history, and study it closely, you realize that though we wrestled with these problems after World War II, we haven't wrestled with them all that much over the last 3/4 of a century. When it comes to globalization and trade. What about this? What about this guy? Well, we've cozied up to Russia. You know, it used to be conservatives who hated Russia. Well, good God, this guy would be turning in his grave, right? If you look at history, and Ronald Reagan at the Berlin Wall in 1987, tear this wall down. Now, it seems like things have been turned on their head. Do we look at that history and get a certain viewpoint, a certain stance in that history? It was the Cold War, right? So it wasn't necessarily a good thing, but there was a consensus, especially when it came to Russia or the Soviet Union before it fell. All right, so again, topsy-turvy, turned upside down. That history, again, teaches us some lessons and at least tells us that people had to deal and leaders had to deal with these issues. North Korea, here's a country that we fought a war in, after World War II, right? In the Korean War, right? Now, it seems, are we cozying up or trusting North Korea? Perhaps, perhaps not. But look at Harry Truman there, President Truman there. Truman Tough, it was called, especially when it came to fighting the Korean War, thousands of miles from our shores. Even Bill Clinton pictured here with the current leader's father. They don't look that happy. It's grim, right? Now, that's changed. And not to bash anybody or conservative or liberal, but it's really more conservative voices have to make some decisions here because things have changed around. It's really been, again, turned on its head. NATO, perhaps pulling out or cutting our defense spending. Oh, hell, that was a liberal policy. This is Senator Mike Mansfield, the Senate Majority Leader in the 1960s, meeting with President Lyndon Johnson, pushing him to cut our NATO budget. Those are liberal Democrats who said that. Not now. Not now. Why did they do it in the past? Why and what will change in the future? And finally, immigration. Here's our symbol of the United States, the Statue of Liberty. I don't need to tell you about walls and other things like this, but this was an ethic. This was the very American values of open borders, not totally open borders, but a nation of immigrants, right? That all of us came from. All right, that has been tested too. Some of it's politicized, no doubt, but there is a following there too. Can you look back at immigration? It was never clean. It was never an easy sell. But things have changed here too. This is what our students are wrestling with now. They are wrestling. I keep using that term, wrestling. And we do it also at CU. You just saw the chancellor up here, and here he is leading the charge at the Conference on World Affairs. We deal with all of these issues, and we deal with them in the classroom too. And we have specialists who come in for my class on U.S. diplomacy this semester, will come into my class and talk for an hour and 15 minutes one-on-one with these students. It's a real treat for them. What does it all mean for you? What do you take away? We'll take a long view. Take a long view here. Though we might be panicked, though we might be disgusted, though we might be worried or happy, or depending how you are, what position you have, you can come away with knowing that students are learning and that they're coming at you soon too as graduates. And that when you walk out of this room too, you can engage in the same dialogue that historians have and that people in history have done. You can take that longer perspective and engage in the world, okay? That's what CU Next is about. And that's what our students are about, and that's what you as leaders and our future leaders are about too. Thank you very much.